Hello all, I hope you're doing well. I've been reading a bit of Neoplatonism recently, specifically about Plotinus, and I thought I'd do a quick video outlining his 5 keys to the path back to what he terms as the One. In modern parlance we could say that's something more like peace within, meaning, something along those lines. And this is me really drawing out the essence of what I've been reading, and I thought it would make a really good video, especially in this modern era where we're very often trapped in our lower self, as I often refer to it as, the ego self, the self that wants drama and pleasure from the world. Of course, the tragedy of modern life is we often forget we're not going to get completion from the world. Passing completion, yes indeed, often ecstatic in the forms of women or intoxicants, or even just pleasure and chasing, status or whatever it is. But in the end, it always unfurls. And the wise man seeks beyond this, whereas the fool returns back into the world. That's a classic Christian teaching. Plotinus actually was very influential on the early Christians, Christian mystics and philosophers and so on. However, Plotinus would say, and I would think this is a wonderful teaching, that the real purpose of life is the ascendant journey of your soul. So at the moment, again, you'll see the crossovers with Christianity here. Your soul is almost trapped in a lower energy. It's trapped in the body and the mind. And through our ignorance, we think that's what we are. But Plotinus is saying that's not our true reality. The soul craves to go home. And of course, the Christian version of that would be, the soul craves God, to go to heaven, which is not exactly the same, but sort of what Plotinus is referring to when he says the One. Of course, the Christian tradition throws in a very strong love energy, a father energy as well, which is particularly beautiful. But Plotinus is obviously more philosophical and mystic in his outlook. Anyway, let's go through what these are, and hopefully you can make a note of these and try and implement them in your own life. Not as some sort of discipline thing of, you've got to do it suddenly, but in a quiet structure that can be added in over the years and always be something to bring us back away from the noise of the world and to a higher service. So the first one is practicing virtue. And I think, again, we can understand this through a Christian frame, being a good person and so on. But I don't think that's exactly what Plotinus is talking to. I think he means something more like living your life authentically. And again, in modernity, we tend to think authentically means being rude or nasty. The one you get a lot is I don't give an F what other people think, And normally that's a sign you do care what other people think. But, and you should care what other people think to an extent as well, of course. It's normal, you're a collective being. But the point is, that I think Plotinus is getting at is being what you truly are, in all of your idiosyncrasies. And that doesn't mean, we're all going to go down a similar route. We're all going to have a nature to ourselves. And in a way, it's digging to discover what that nature is and being authentic in that nature, And perhaps even giving ourselves the time to make the mistakes we have to make to get deeper into who we are, because it's not simple. I think it's also a bit about having that ability to reflect, and living with intention. I think that's what it's about. Not about being perfect, but discovering who you are. In a sense, you could say there's something of Jung's individuation about this. And I've always thought that Jung is, I'm a big fan of Jung, but in a sense you could say Jung is limited to the mental and subconscious level, whereas Plotinus takes it out one level further into the more mystic spiritual dimension. And Jung famously said, the purpose of life is individuation. It's this very modern version of this. Individuation basically means becoming who you are outside of the tribe. And that doesn't mean hating the tribe, by the way. As I've often said, in the initiatory understanding, you become yourself and then you almost re-implement yourself as a bastion to hold the tradition together. That might be my own little extra on that. But anyway, the point I'm making is that's a modern version of it. But I think Plotinus is going a bit deeper than that, than just becoming yourself as an individual, but more letting that light of being the One shine naturally through you in the same way that a tree can only be an oak tree, if you like. And that's its identity, that's its essence, and it is that fully. And on the subject of oak trees, it brings us to number 2, which is to contemplate beauty. I think this is especially important in this day and age because beauty, number one, is more powerful than ideology. You know, if you watch the main channel, you'll know I'm a big believer that Western man is trapped in ideology at the moment. You know, left and right, all this sort of things. It's worse on the left, but the right can sink into it too. And the point here is that beauty overcomes that. There are certain things which are pre-intellectual. Beauty, pain is one, love is another one. And these can almost pierce through our veil of ignorance. And I think you don't have to be staring at some supposedly great work of art if you're not interested in art. Even going out into nature, looking at a mountain or a lovely hill or a lovely tree can be enough. It's whatever gives you that moment of silence, you know, and you're overcome by the sensation of beauty and awe. Now, why this is important is one, because again, it breaks through the ideological frame. But also, I think it does introduce us into what you could call a natural hierarchy implicit in being. So one of the features of modernity is this promotion of ugliness. People often point to the Frankfurt School and so on, with semi-accuracy. You know, there is something in there, especially around the ideas of one-dimensional man and the idea that, you know, beauty can be a structure in and of itself to lead to some form of oppression. So you should promote ugliness to sort of buckle the system. At least that was the thinking, and that led to modern art and so on. But of course, what this has led to now is almost a culture of ugliness where beauty itself is demeaned and certainly abused. You know, you get that with women a lot, the OnlyFansification of female beauty. But anyway, the point is, as we contemplate beauty, we are reintroduced to the natural hierarchy implicit in being itself. You know, you notice there's a difference between a beautiful tree and dog shit. Now, on a meta level, you could say, well, yeah, it's all being, and that's true on one level, but we also can see that there is an innate difference between these things in the terms of the beauty that they offer. So it reintroduces us into these cosmic dimensions once more. Now, again, I think there is a dimension of beauty and the contemplation of beauty within Plotinus, and I think in philosophy, can't speak generally, in that beauty almost speaks to a moral dimension as well. So the more contemplation of beauty, the more moral fortitude one gains as well. You know, in how you speak, in how you treat others, in how you respond to the world around you, in how the world responds to you even too, if we're to take it on a karmic level. So the contemplation of beauty is almost an act of rebellion, I think, in modernity. Next one is cultivating eros. Now, eros, I'm sure you've heard this phrase before. It's a form of love. I think in the Platonic understanding, you have the different forms of love. But in this understanding, we're speaking it about as something you could say of love for the one. In Christian language, that would be love for God. If you're not a Christian, don't worry about it. Again, I think there are experiences we have in life where a love of life itself and its incredible beauty can overtake us. You know, even simply just recognizing the incredible beauty and technicality of the body, and even spending a moment to be deeply thankful for what the body can do. The human mind tends to look at what's wrong. It's glass half full. The spirit is glass half empty. The spirit is very much glass half full. And it will see, and I think correctly, see just the incredible invention that your body is. You know, and it's made with such wisdom, as is everything, you know, in the world, in the universe. So there's something about this recognition, this natural love that develops there. Now, again, that's a very simplistic way of explaining it. On the meta-mystic level, it will be something like, as the mystic may say, you know, I think it was Meister Eckhart who said, you know, the eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. And that's a very classic mystic motif, not an idea. It's a realization that the very animating force of being is God's energy itself. And that works into, or we've fallen into the lower self, the mind and so on, and we look back on that being nature. And as we recognize it's God himself, or the nature of being itself, it's almost it's the part where the snake eats its tail. And there's an intellectual realization there, which isn't that grand. You know, I'm sure you can understand it, even me just saying it. But what they're saying is there's a heart realization, you know, which is the true realization. It's the I am that I am. as Moses seeks in the burning bush. And you get this throughout the different traditions in the mystics, and the esotericists will say this in different ways. I think Rumi said about as much. I think Rumi's a Sufi poet, by the way, something along the lines of, I search for God and I find myself. I search for myself and I find God. It's the same thing exactly. This is why I often say, this atheist idea that it's only science that runs by the same rules is wrong. It's just we don't have a very in-depth understanding. We think only with the mind, and we don't understand the deeper aspects of the traditions around us, because most of the time it's not fair to say we don't bother to look into them. I think most people aren't really given a chance to, and the religious and spiritual teaching is quite poor. It is changing, actually, though, to be fair. But anyway, that's the next one, cultivating eros, that recognition of being, of love, and the creation itself, which is an act of beauty. Remember, the beauty you witness is only capable of being witnessed because of your senses. You're a divine creation through which the divine witnesses its own creation. We are a player in this wonderful drama. Again, a lot of pain in that drama too, don't get me wrong, but it's the suffering that is the thing that realization can eradicate. Next one, from Plotinus, is engage in philosophy. And again, I think we have to be really clear what this means. This doesn't mean arguing. This is what we kind of think of as philosophy, heavy thinking, almost that Jordan Peterson way. I have this joke with my friend that, you see Jordan Peterson, he's almost like in pain sometimes when he's thinking things like, I can't figure it out. I don't want to mock the guy because, he's very bright and all that. But you almost think like, Jordan, man, for once, let go. Let go to the tradition. You're always trying to work it out. You're never going to work it out in its fullness. You can try, in a sense, you can do beautiful things by trying, but you do need to give in every once in a while. Let the wisdom of God flow over you, But anyway, the point I'm getting here is when we're speaking about engaging in philosophy in this context, we have to remember philosophy back in the time of the Neoplatonists meant really just general learning. Mathematics was part of philosophy, art was part of philosophy, psychology was part of philosophy, spirituality was part of philosophy. I can't remember exactly what philosophy means. I think the root word is love of knowledge, something like that. So that's essentially what it means. And when we're saying this isn't, knowledge is power type thing in this modernist post-structuralist lens. It's simply the love of knowledge for itself, for discovering things about the world, And we're all going to be, again, this goes back to number one, we're all going to be drawn in a different direction in that sense. If I'm left to my own devices, I will happily read about mysticism. A little bit of philosophy here and there, but philosophy can be a bit heavy for me, and I'm not well trained in it either, to be honest. And a bit of politics as well. But broadly speaking, I'm most comfortable with mysticism. But each of us are different. If you're drawn to sort of science and engineering, wonderful. Use the beauty of your mind to explore that, There's no right or wrong here. And when he's saying engage in philosophy, again, it's a bit like, some of you might have heard the debate I had with a friend of mine, Fred, on the Substack. And we were having a discussion because I'm very wary of the market now, capitalism. I wouldn't say I'm anti-capitalist, wouldn't quite go that far. But I'm certainly capitalist wary, I think, at this point. I've never been that comfortable with it. I've always been very much Scrutonian, T.S. Eliot, G.K. Chesterton, that side. If I'm to be on the political spectrum of the sort of conservative right, it's always romantic right, I guess, is where I've always felt most at home. But with the market, I've always almost sympathised to an extent with elements of the centre and even the left with their criticisms, although obviously I'm not a socialist, in the traditional sense of the word anyway. But the point I'm making here is, we had a debate because he's very much a free market guy. And we tried to conduct that debate in the spirit that Plotinus is talking to here. Not trying to win, not trying to do gotchas, not trying to basically have our ego position and shout the other person down. And I was inspired to do it this way after listening to an incredibly intelligent man in a debate, who I was sympathetic to, or still am really, to his positions. But God, he was difficult. He wouldn't let the other person speak. He'd go on for 25 minutes. He'd say he's wrapping up after 10 and then go on for another 15 minutes. And ask this guy, basically 10 different questions with 5 different dimensions each, and make the same point 5 times over. And as soon as the guy got a chance to answer, after 20 seconds, he'd be butting in. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? It's like, give the guy a chance, And I thought, even though the guy is really clever, much cleverer than I am, and also, on board with what I believe, I thought the spirit is just all wrong. This isn't engaging in philosophy, as I think Plotinus is talking to. By all means, you can disagree. By all means, you can go through the dialectical process of, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, i.e., your hypotheses, the counter to that, and then bringing the two together at the end with a conclusion. You can do that, but again, the point is, I think, letting go of your own biases and ego and desire to win, and allowing yourself to critically examine what's in front of you. Note the contradictions in your own thought and in others. And instead of trying to win, see it as a way to purify the mind and get down to the truth of the soul. Now again, this isn't easy. We're all fallen human beings. We're all the same. You want to win in a debate. You want to have that gotcha. You want to have that great line, It increasingly is making, I think, a lot of these YouTube debates unwatchable. Because it just becomes that. And then they both go away and say they destroyed the other and their audiences. Yeah, you got him. But in reality, no one learns anything, or at least I didn't learn anything, apart from how to argue. But anyway, the point I'm making is, here, we're trying to get closer to the truth through true realization. And even if you do fall into that lower self where you want to win, that's fine. That's all right. We're fallen creatures. Again, Christian tradition is very good for that. Just recognizing it, making restitution, quick prayer if you're Christian. Sorry, Lord, I got lost in my lower self. Please aid me in coming to higher knowledge and being more still, something like that. And just move on. It's fine, not a big deal. We're all going to make mistakes and fall into lower self and all that. Again, if you're not Christian, no worries, but it's the same practice of just got lost a bit in my mind there. Just trying to win all the time. And just notice it, And then the final step, which I think is really important, is seeking ecstasy. And again, I think you can take it as read. He doesn't mean ecstasy literally, as in the boshing a load of pills on a Friday night, getting off your head and trying to hook up with the chickie poos. That might be part of your life, even for some of us, a necessary part of our journey. I don't promote it, but I know I've engaged in these things in the past in my 20s, and I kind of had to learn. I'm not a sort of person who can learn by watching other people. I'm a bit of a slow learner. Unfortunately, God needs to step in and bang my head against the wall a few times, and I'm like, oh, I get it now. Maybe I should stop doing this. Yes, maybe you should. But I still do it every now and again. It's human nature, fallen beings. It's a lovely phrase in the New Testament from Paul speaks about, why do I do what I don't want to do? Anyway, that's human nature. But I think when he's talking about seeking ecstasy here, he means a sort of direct, ecstatic experience which is rooted in the union with the one. And again, there's no wrong or right way to do this. Well, I suppose there are wrong ways to do it if we're just going to chase pleasures and bosh a load of drugs, drink alcohol, try and bed all the women. That was almost like a stage of growth that some men get lost in. Can, of course, get you really stuck that if you're in it too long. It's risky. But the point is we move towards the ecstatic experience that comes naturally. And this can be through different formations, whether it's dance, whether it's poetry, whether it's nature, whether it's going to the gym and lifting weights. There's all manner of different ways you can find that ecstasy. Reading, philosophical contemplation, meditation, prayer, reading the masters themselves. There's all manner of ways, but again, your soul will call to you and you'll know what it is because your soul comes alive when you're doing it, And it's that realignment with what we truly are, merging with the ultimate source of all existence. And again, it's that part where the mind goes quiet. And of course, the more that we get that ecstasy, the more we turn away from the pleasures of the world. Now, I personally believe this is a journey. There are people who have the huge awakening experience. That does happen, but it's quite rare in my experience. And the way I've experienced it and seen other men experience it over the years is normally glimpses of divine peace or divine truth. I know I've had them. And I think I spoke about it before. I hooked up with a girl I was particularly obsessive with in my late 20s. And I spent the night at hers and I felt all weird about it because I was like, I feel like I'm kind of regressing. I felt like I was over this girl and I've gone back to her. A long story short, the transport had broken down in London and I had to walk across the city. And by the time I got halfway, I thought, I just don't need her anymore. And I felt very free after feeling quite bad about it, because I thought, I've done really well to move on from this girl. But I got on this bus as the transport started up again, and I had this very clear feeling of gold within, and it was almost like God was giving me back, or I had that realization back of my true sensitivity within, and the instinct was to give it to God. And I very much did, just quiet prayer in my head, just being still on the bus and just saying, God, I don't want to chase these women of the world anymore. It just leads me to hell. I don't want to do it. I want to be, a good man and be as you want me to be. And please have this, this sensitivity inside of me and do with me as you will. And, I don't think I've ever been obsessive about a woman again since. Now, I've been obsessive about other things, not nearly as badly, I should add. I've had other challenges that have come in different ways. But when it comes to actual women, I've been free of it, really have been. And again, it comes from these experiences, which can be magical. Was it William James who wrote Varieties of the Religious Experience and spoke a lot about this? It's these big experiences which have a huge paradigm shift. I think, again, to refer to Jung again, he spoke about the idea of many people who are trapped in neuroses have too shallow a spiritual horizon. And if that horizon can be extended, you'll find that their personality will shift quite a lot. But it's rocky making that shift. And that's part of the spiritual journey. It's why it's not always easy. But this, again, is why the ecstasy is very powerful. Again, I'd be wary of some of the stuff you see online about, I'm doing my Vipassana and I'm going to be enlightened. All this future enlightenment is really a bit of a con. Not that, people don't ever find levels of spiritual realization, but, as soon as we're saying something in the future, it becomes another mind formation. God is here and now. Enlightenment, quote unquote, is here and now. I've personally given up on all the enlightenment stuff. I think it leads you down the wrong paths. That's my own belief. I think, God is here and now, and that's all you really need to know. The rest of it, God will take care of. Again, I'm using spiritual language there. If you don't think that way, you could just say being or life will take care of it. Anyway, these are 5 tools. I hope they're helpful in your own life, and I will be doing some work on these again down the line. The group work will start up again towards the end of the year, probably. If you're interested, do reach out. If you're interested in the one-on-one work, again, you can reach out to me, do coaching one-on-one now too. And courses linked below too if you want to do that, the 30-day daily disciplines to get you started on this more spiritual traditionalist life. Other than that, do subscribe to the channel, enjoy the rest of your day, and peace be with you.